Dr. Ivan Beckley is the co-founder of Suvera Health, a Google-backed virtual clinic which has raised over £6 million in funding. Ivan started Suvera whilst in medical school at UCL and has since expanded it from a basic app which could help GPs or primary care physicians complete medication reviews for their patients to a full-fledged virtual care platform. We dig deep into the lessons and habits that have helped Ivan grow Suvera, like how the obstacle is often the way and how he leans into discomfort as a signal of future success. We speak about how he changed the minds of people who were skeptical of him, how someone building in healthcare today could move faster than him, and what it's like being a black man in health tech. I hope you enjoy.
My ambition was always to do well in life. And when you're from parents who moved to this country and had to find and build a life from scratch, and being the eldest in that family, you definitely build a sense of determination to kind of do something important and meaningful, because everything felt like a struggle. And so growing up, that was always my ambition, is to do something meaningful that allowed me, my family, to kind of do what we wanted to do in the way we wanted to do it without constraints that we had growing up. And so, I went through school trying my best to embrace everything that school kind of threw at me, which was, the exams, the tests, the assessments. I wouldn't say that I was the smartest person. I guess I was the most observant. I think that was the only thing I did different, was that I was super aware of school was a game, and there are people who played it really well and there are people who didn't. And so I tried to learn the rules of the game, learn these things, don't learn these things. And then that, by definition, meant that you did well in exams or better than most, and you were then classed as smart. But really, I was just super observant, and then, continued secondary school, etc. And then decided at one point that I needed to think about what I wanted to do for university. I was always determined to go to university and find a way. And I didn't know how you even apply to university. I just knew it was something you get to at some point and then decide. And so, I ended up deciding to do medicine through various reasons, more because I went to a summer school, and it was a real eye-opener that normal people could become doctors. Sounds crazy, but before growing up, I always thought you had to be super special to become a doctor. Something, either you were smart, you had connections, or there was something about you that allowed you to reach that prestigious stage of qualifying to be a doctor. When really I realized it was just loads of people, or there are people who are in studying medicine who are very normal backgrounds and just had a determination to do it. I had this determination to become a surgeon. But once I started studying medicine, you started really understanding what it meant to be a doctor, really understanding what a day-to-day was like. The problems of the system became really apparent to me, I think more than most people. And so when I went in and saw these problems, I became kind of intrigued about who were trying to solve these problems, because it was so obvious to me that this couldn't continue. Some of those problems were like, systems that were so dated and no one had any desire to update them. Information that just didn't flow, and you had to copy and paste everywhere. Paper records, like very simple things that just didn't make sense why it still is the way they are. And so I ended up interning at various companies, or hustling my way to intern at various different companies, I think is what I'd say, just to try and find a space where people were trying to solve these problems with intelligent people and processes and technology, which then led me to think I want to do this more. And decided to take a year out of medical school to do a master's in data science, also at UCL, but didn't go anywhere. And that led me down a path to end up at Google, because they sponsored my master's through a various set of events, which I'm happy to explain. But really, it was me trying to look for opportunities to really apply what I was trying to learn in the master's in a meaningful way. And so that was a really fortuitous opportunity. And after being at Google, working at the team, doing the masters, your brain becomes really aware that there is so much opportunity to see a new world where healthcare technology and can coexist. And so I think towards the end of my medical degree, I became really determined to find a way to do something on my own steam. And so eventually kind of grabbed my two co-founders now, Will and Riz, to said we should do something. We should start something. I don't know what it'd be. I don't know how successful it'd be, but I think it's worth it. So we started Suvera with the intention of really bringing together healthcare and technology in a really meaningful way that hopefully built something valuable.
So at the start of your story, you said that growing up, you always knew that you wanted to, on one side, do something that would kind of make you comfortable, and then on the other side, do something meaningful for the world, right? But if you
Yeah.
had to put percentages on each one, so one side is just making
Mm,
cash and one side is doing something
mm.
meaningful in the world, what was the split there?
That's so interesting. I would say I was definitely more motivated by kind of overcoming the struggle that we had growing up. Um, I wanted to do it in a way that actually I could feel proud of, but really the real goal was to be in a career where I knew that I could support my family, because really that was the most important thing to me. Doing good to the world was kind of like an added benefit, and that's the honest truth.
So can you take me to the part in your story where maybe it's a pivotal point in which you do something and then Severa really takes wings? Like when was that in your
Mm.
story?
Oh, there is like a whole chasm of like ups and downs, and like, there's like fairy tales where, they go on this journey and then they meet something and then someone decides to go this path. All of those things happened at Journey of Suvera. So we came from this place as a medical school project, and we're doing it kind of for fun because, medicine was, we needed a distraction from medicine that was exciting and interesting. And, when we built this app, it kind of worked. People kind of liked it. It didn't have any formation of a business. We weren't thinking about commercializing anything. And then after I did that before I went to Google for my internship. After leaving Google, I felt like we should make this into something really scalable and really something that has legs. And so I started to think about how can this become a business.
Wait, sorry,
Um,
what's this app doing at this point?
at this point, this app, okay, I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't an app. It was a prototype. It was like a series of screens that were linked together, and you could just barely click between them. So it was as janky as it gets. And so at this point, you could click on a few medications, like 5, and you could see information really clearly labeled and, filtered. That's all it was. And so after that, I said, okay, I left Google, came back and said, I want to make this something scalable, something big, because that's how Google think, right? And we eventually did the ABC of where could this become and what would we need to do, and realized we had to either grow this to millions of users by magic, um, or we had to make this into a pharmacy, because those were the two routes. Either you commercialize through advertising or sponsorship, or you make it a pharmacy where your main goal was to generate loads of medications and dispense. And I knew nothing about being a pharmacy, and I thought getting millions of users out of thin air, it felt like, was too hard. So we pivoted and we said, actually, medication is a part of what doctors and nurses and the clinical system needs to do, or manage as part of care. So, which all happens in medication reviews. And so how can we somehow use our technology to make medication reviews easy? And then we realized actually medication reviews can be automated. When we asked doctors, how do you do medication reviews? They're like, we fill out this form. That's it. Then we said, the same form? It's like, oh, the form changes, but more or less the same form. Um, and so we decided to build this form inside the app and said, we could send this to patients, they could fill a form and you get all these reviews without speaking to anyone. And they said, oh, that could be interesting. And so we did it with one practice, and then they got so many forms that they told us to stop. And then we realized, one, patients actually like a more accessible way to speak to their clinician, and they're willing to give a try at something that makes their lives a bit easier. They don't have to book an appointment and just spend half a day just to do a medication review. But it also taught us that you're giving more information to practices without their ability to really handle that information, because you gave them so much. Whereas before, it came in drips and drabs. It came in when they saw the patient, not when the patient decided to send them in at 12 o'clock at night. And so we realized that there was two things that we could really design around: is create a more accessible route to access clinician or primary care, but do it in a way that managed that demand. And so Suvera pivoted again to where we are today, which is a virtual clinic. where we decided to let's do all the reviews and let's do it with all of our clinicians. Therefore, the practice basically do nothing, and they have a list of patients who have been reviewed for not only their medication but also their condition that they manage. So we moved
Wait, so it
to
sounds
long term.
at that part of the story, you had like patient product fit in the sense that people wanted
Yeah,
to use it, but you didn't
yeah.
necessarily have clinician product
Mm,
fit or
mm,
or market fit even. So
mm-hmm,
how did you get to the stage where you make something that, okay, patients like using this, but now I
mm.
want doctors and clinics and stuff to actually enjoy this as well? Like, what transition did you make there?
Yeah, I mean, we realized that their biggest problem was they didn't have enough people, and they had this almost untethered demand coming their way. And so we realized that what they needed is a team to support them with all that demand. No, they didn't need a tech solution, because the tech solution only generated more work for them. And I think this is the big thing that I see between companies that do really well and companies that just about get there or struggle, is that they think that their solution will reduce work and will help make things efficient. Whereas most times, actually, they make things less efficient because you put more process in the way of the outcome. And you also tend to generate more work. And we're seeing a lot of that with some of the triage platforms, that came about during the pandemic, which is, you can go online, type in your symptoms, and then someone will get back to you. So if you allow a patient to do that, of course they're going to do it 3-4 times more than they would if they had to book an appointment and call and wait and then see somebody before they told them how they were feeling. And so we had to recognize that the biggest problem in the system was that there just wasn't enough staff for the demand. And so we had to support them to meet that demand.
Okay, so three questions. So what stage were you at in terms of growth and users and things at this point in the story? Where are you now, if you're willing to answer that? And then
Yeah.
how did you get from A to B?
Oh, I think our first review was like with 200 patients, something like that. It was a pilot, very small, and we sent basically a text message to say you can now review your blood pressure. So we started with high blood pressure, using an app, and we shipped this app to both Android and Apple. We got the approvals, it's ready to go, and then you had this flood of patients just like submit loads of information. And then we eventually had to stop it because the practice had to stop it. And then we decided, okay, this isn't going to scale if every time we do this and patients engage, that we have to stop it. And so I reached out to our now medical director, Anthony, and said, I feel like we're going to need a care team, and I have no idea how to do that, but I think you do. And he said, okay, well, let's have a chat. We spoke. And then Anthony became the pseudo care team in a pilot kind of study where, he was a registered GP. He had all the approvals to look after patients. So he became like an extension of the practice we worked with. And the reviews were done in the app and then went to him. And then, he will check it and then say, you're all good to go. Or he will say, actually, no, we need to see you because your blood pressure is quite high. And the practice loved it. They had a GP working with them. Granted, it was for free. So, of course, they loved it. And who did the reviews, and someone checked it and they had to do nothing. So we said, we need to scale this. And so we registered to the Care Quality Commission because we were providing care. We did the work to make sure we had the proper checks and balances. We improved our technology so it was more safe. And we started to sell the service to GP practices, groups of them, and say, we can manage your whole patient list. All you have to do is give us the people you want us to see, and we'll do the rest.
What's been your experience in general when building Suvera in terms of feedback? And I'd be interested in kind of patient/customer feedback you've got and feedback from advisors, etc. Has it always been something that's been very useful? And are there times that you've had to say, okay, I appreciate your feedback, but we're going to do something else? Like, what's been your whole take?
What I didn't say is that there were some patients, I would say about half of patients, who had a good time using the application. And they reviewed their condition and they were able to send it off to their practice. There was the other half of patients who absolutely despised everything to do with Suvera. They were like, what are you doing? Why are you here? Sometimes I was on those customer calls and, we had a lady, lovely lady, And she said, I've just got a text message to review an app. What's an app? And she was so upset. And then we realized that actually this isn't going to work for a lot of people, and we need to build something that addresses that, difference between people's tech literacy. So patients, there are some patients who loved it, some patients who absolutely despised it. And also there were a lot of practices that just didn't believe that we could be helpful, or felt like, there was a lot of risk in kind of having their patients managed for blood pressure by a company or that sat outside the system. And so we, not everyone we spoke to was welcoming all arms, but I think it's more recognizing that the narrative for every new service or technology has always been kind of fraught with a lot of skepticism, right? I don't believe this could work. I don't believe we even need it. I think the way things are not great, but it works. And then you realize that actually everything is a slow progress of realization that actually it can be better. And these guys, although their early version weren't that good, they are improving over time. So I think understanding and learning how innovation comes to fruition is really important to overcome those hurdles where people are saying no and they don't believe you can do it. Otherwise, so easy to give up. There are more people who are saying like this isn't going to work than there are people who say it will. But if you understand how innovation comes about, you realize that that's a necessary part. If anything, if everyone's openly working moms, you should be a bit worried, because either you're a bit too late with what you're doing and there are loads of people who are also doing it, or that people don't really understand the risks, or you're not doing something innovative enough for them to really understand or see any risk in it.
Yeah, so healthcare is obviously, and probably somewhat rightly so, a very obstructive and bureaucratic space that's hard to move fast in. How did you stay positive and keep driving forward? Because the only inkling I've got is that maybe it's something about your character, or secondly, it might be something about, you might feel that the product really had legs, you did have some proof that it was a legit thing that would work. What kept you going essentially?
I would say two main things. One was having worked at other companies who were very well funded, who were getting contracts, who were growing. You become aware of the things they do well, but also the things they don't do well. And you're also aware of what it takes to get to that stage. And so I was very aware of those journeys from the companies that I'd worked in, and actually how they had false starts. But if they hadn't persevered, they wouldn't have got to where they are. And so again, just knowing the narrative of companies that become where they are today, it wasn't smooth sailing. And if anything, the struggle is a necessary part of the success later on. And that I always kept in my mind that when we face something, I'm like, this is good. Struggle is good, because that means actually on the other side of that is more success. And so I think it's just framing your mindset to see that difficulty as the way. As they talk about, Ryan Holiday talks about obstacle is the way. That was very much kind of my mentality, was that every time we were met with friction, I was like, follow it. Let's keep pushing and see how far we can go. And also, I think because I'd also been in the environment, second point is because I was in the environment, having worked at Google with the best of the best minds, building some of the best products, things that wouldn't be seen in real life for years to come. I also understood the things that were just not going to be done at that level, things Google wouldn't commit to, the things that were still left on the table. So I could see that, if big tech, or from the perspective of Google, wasn't going to do it, someone had to do it. And so they felt like there was an opportunity. I think if I hadn't gone to those environments or been in those rooms, I would have believed they would do it, but I knew that they wouldn't. And then the third thing, I think, just having a really great team of people. Like Will, when I was demoralized, he was like, we can do it. And then when he was demoralized, I was like, we can do it. And so I think just having the right people who have a sense of something must be possible, and if we don't find out, someone else will.
Ivan, earlier on in your in your story, you mentioned that you kind of come from humble beginnings and kind of achieved amazing things. Can you explain to me, as a brown man, the experience of someone who's Black building
Mm-hmm.
in healthcare or tech. And I'd be
Mm-hmm.
particularly interested in knowing, yeah, just give me, put those glasses on me, like help me understand.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
also what are the cons of that? And then maybe what are the pros as well? Have there been any benefits of being Black?
Yeah, I mean, being a Black man in healthcare and healthcare technology, you definitely feel like a unicorn. So I walk around feeling like, there's only one of me here. And that's a good thing. No, not a good thing, but I think more just a sense of I'm bringing something different to the table. And I don't look at, I don't try to look at things and saying, rather than saying this is horrible, everyone is terrible, everyone in the industry who's enabled this to happen is horrific. I'm actually saying this is an opportunity to prove things that haven't been proven by someone like me. And so that's a great chance. It is difficult because to build a company that's so risky, you need to have really strong backers, supporters, people who are in your corner, even when things are not going well. And people build connection through people they know and understand and have an affinity to. And a lot of that is to do with race. A lot of that is to do with class. A lot of that is to do with upbringing. And so I've always had to work harder to get to where I am. And I think people never really quite understand that. So what I mean is to say that there are more barriers that I have to come across. There are more self-doubt opportunities. There are more people who would put obstacle in the way to overcome to get to the same place. It's like running a race with some kind of weights attached, right? You're going to have to put that extra effort in to even try and keep up. And so that's always been part of my story for unfortunate circumstances, which is society driven. But I can't change that. So all I can do is to use it to make me stronger and more able to do things that other people won't be able to. So, I mean, I used my background, where I was coming from, my difference in being a Black man in this space, as an advantage. I think if I didn't have those personalities, I wouldn't have ended up at Google. I wouldn't have ended up doing the internships that I did. I wouldn't have kind of had this determination to try and do something risky anyway, because the odds were already stacked against me in any direction. So you might as well do it where the upside is huge. So all of those things for me, I kind of turn them on their head and say, actually, being one of a kind in any market is a good thing. And if that means that you're able to lead from the front in that way, equally better. So don't get me wrong, it's lonely, and I would like more people like me to be involved in this space, to be given the opportunity to take the risk. So I don't think if people don't want to take the risk, it's just they don't see a route to opportunity. Because of fortunate events, I've been given the space and the networks to have those people backing me to do the thing that I want to do.
Can we talk about the next step in Suvera's story? And what I want to know is, was it just kind of steady growth from then on? Or was there another inflection point that made things blow up a bit? Like what kind of happens next?
So, I mean, after we pivoted to the virtual clinic, it was a process of kind of getting our regulations in place and making sure that we had the foundation, because there was a big risk that if we didn't, we would get in trouble. But we stayed focused and we managed to get that in place. And during all of that time, we were in communication with practices and we were really understanding what they needed from us and how we needed to operate. So we ran small pilots, again, replicating the first pilot we did, and growing the team to support those pilots. And the next inflection point then became when we managed to sign relationships, once we had our regulation, with large groups of practices, who said, we're not just going to give you one practice set of patients, but 3, 4, 5, 6. Then it became a validation to say, okay, someone's going to trust us with not just a few hundred patients, but a few thousand. And that really said, okay, that this is a model where there is a great need to support patients on a population level than a practice to practice level. And then after, I would say it was validation from funding and raising investment. And, I would say not every business needs to raise investment, but if you're going to do something that's as risky as this in healthcare, you're going to really struggle without it. And so we recognized that we had some initial money in the bank, And this was all raised, on that first initial idea, the medication review that we wanted to automate. So people really took a bet on us, not the idea, because we ended up changing it. And then once we had more validation from the virtual clinic, we could justify raising more. And so that was another inflection, because it helped us, one, to get that validation from seasoned investors. These people, they do it for a living. To say, actually, I believe that you could utilize our capital to build something meaningful. So that was a kind of business building validation that there is something here worth investing in.
If someone wanted to do what you do, but faster, and I mean this question from maybe a principal's point of view rather than like a specific, do this. Are there any things that come to mind that you would advise them?
I think if somebody was to do what we're trying to do, or go down the path of creating something in this space, with a similar mentality, I think the thing I would recommend or suggest to help them get there faster is to spend more time really understanding what can you put in front of people that really requires very little capital that you can learn from. And the reason I say that is because I feel like, we saw this opportunity with the virtual clinic, but had this very strong desire to really grow it as soon as we saw an opportunity. And I think we could have spent more time really kind of diving into that space and really understanding the nuances of, the challenges that people would have and really where customers are coming from. And I think later on, when we began to realize that there was more for us to do, did we take a step back and then have those conversations again. So I think when you see something working, try not to get too far ahead of yourself. Like, see how you can make it work a little bit better, and see how you can really understand the levers that would help this add more value to customers before you then decide, okay, we're going to push on the gas. So trying to lean off the gas, I would say, even when things are working a bit, so that you can build those series of learnings. That's the first thing. So not diving too far in, even when you recognize there's signals of things. The second thing I would say is focusing a lot more on your team and making sure you don't make decisions about co-founders or people who's going to lead your technology too early. Really, what you want are people who are willing to grind to figure out something early, and don't make too many commitments to people, because then you have to hold yourself to that commitment without really knowing what's going to happen next. So try and, be very clear that we don't know what's happening, but we can offer you this. It's going to be a role to help our technology. It's not going to be head of engineering or VP of engineering or, whatever it is. You're going to be an engineer working with us. I'm going to be the product guy. And keeping things ill-defined early and just working collaboratively with the team without hierarchy or titles helps to move that ego out the way and just say we're here to do something powerful, because team dynamics and who does what and who's in charge of what can cause a lot of delay. And I think we could have done better to just strip away those titles early on and just say, I need someone who works in design and branding, someone who can work on this, and we're going to work as a team to kind of get this done. And when we feel like there's business here, we will define those things better. But when you're bringing together, try not to set too high expectations, because you don't know what the future is going to be.
Have there been any habits or ways you approach problems or ways you approach life that have been helpful in your career?
I'm a big fan of general Stoic philosophy, right? Which I think has become a bit of a kind of Silicon Valley kind of like ritual approach, which for those who don't know, the Stoic philosophy kind of stems from, the likes of Marcus Aurelius, who were Roman empires or leaders who would manage and maintain huge empires. But they had a way of reflecting about their day that recognized their weaknesses and recognized that they were human and recognized that one day it would all end. So I think it's just a sense for me, is adopting this sense so that whatever we do, fundamentally, we all are flawed also. And so as amazing, like everything can go around you, there'll be times when things are not amazing. And so trying not to ride the waves of life will help you to deal with things as and when they come really, really well. And so I've adopted that definitely as part of my thinking. And also a sense, as I've said already, is that to do anything meaningful, there's going to be a lot of risk and you're going to have to face a lot of obstacles, but that is a necessary part of getting to the other end of success. There is no company story which doesn't have some kind of part of it that's fraught with like, this could have been the end situation, you know? And actually, I think that's a necessary part of getting to the place where there is success, because then on the other end of it, you've done something that most people would have thrown their hands up. I remember reading Tony Hsieh, who is the founder of Zappos. He has a book. I listened to this book when I was traveling from Stevenage to home for my final year regularly. And this guy, at points when I said, this is it, this is the end of the company, this has to be it. Obviously knowing that this thing sold to Amazon, but in my head, I thought there's no way you can overcome this. Continuously, he just said, we're going to do it. We're going to try. We're going to keep going. And so that really, for me, built this sense of like, the only way is through. And so you have to build that resilience. And it's not for everyone, to be honest. And there are sometimes you have to know when to call it quits. But most times on the other end of like something that's really hard or difficult or that feels impossible is the thing that's going to help make this last. So that mentality of not riding the waves, but also realizing to get through to anything really substantial and valuable in the world, you're going to have to do the things that other people probably wouldn't do.
I hope you enjoyed that episode. You can find all my links by going to bigpicturemedicine.co.uk. And if you've been enjoying this podcast, then please consider leaving a review. And by the way, all of these episodes are now available in video format on Spotify and on YouTube. Thanks for listening.